How are you, doctor?
I'm weirdly tired. I don't know. But okay. I'm undecided if I'm happy or sad that Morena lost their candidate for Monterey City. He quit. But I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing. It's weird.
I think now Colosio has it easier. Well, I think
Yes,
the votes from Morena are going to get into Colosio.
that or they replace him, but I don't see them winning this in any scenario. Because they have their best alternative is somebody who's already running for federal deputy, so they have no one right now. Um, but that's okay. I want to talk to you today, dear students, about nationalist policies. It's going to be one of those more just discussion based sessions. It'll be probably a bit shorter because I don't have endless things to go through. But I just wanted to use this to, well, like with conservatism, to take some elements of nationalism and see what you think of them if we isolate them from the surrounding ideology, let's say. And to talk about the strengths and the weaknesses, right? What do you think about and what do you think are the strengths and the weaknesses of each policy? So that's what we're going to do. Nice and simple. I hope you're ready, enthusiastic, and all these other things. Starting with a very nationalist, culturally nationalist policy um, of limiting cultural influence. The idea here is that you want to protect your country from cultural erosion by others, for example, by the Americans. And there's ways you could do this. One way is that you force public media, or any media really, to use a minimum percentage of national productions. So play national music, play national TV shows. Doesn't need to be about Mexico, right? It just needs to be made in Mexico. To protect your own cultural market, to protect your artists against influence from Hollywood or Japan or whatever you want that to be. This exists, for example, in France. In France, you have a rule that 60% of things on TV and on radio have to be made in Europe, and 40% of them have to be made in France to protect their own market, let's say. Mr. Diego, what do you think?
Teacher, it's
Yes.
like the law for for like streaming platforms to like the 5 or 10% to be Mexican content. You know that?
Yes, but it's a stronger variant of that, right?
All right.
Like 5 or 10%. That's very little. But so the majority of things, let's say, would have to be from there. What do you think are some good or some bad things about such a policy? If we were to apply, for example, the French thing, right? Let's say 60% would then be Middle America, and 40% should be Mexican.
Well, I think it's kind of well, if you're hiring an American platform, I think you want to see like American content because there are Mexican platforms like I don't know Blim, but I think it's kind of a interesting thing that they make like a little percent. I think the like 40% is it's a lot. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. But if we talk about strengths and weaknesses, like what? So what do you think would be a weakness of such a policy or negative?
Well, a weakness, I don't know, but a strong thing is that you give a lot of opportunities for Mexican artists, and that's a great thing. But a weakness, maybe we will make like the platform to lose interest in on your country because like they will need to invest a lot of content on your country that maybe well, they are not interested.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Sophia.
Well, for me, a strain may will be that you protect the local economy, so you
Mm-hmm.
don't depend completely in other countries. For example, us that we depend a little bit much in the United States, but a weakness I think that maybe like the media from another countries like they will not be kind of interested in us. Like I feel like maybe it could affect the relation in the international arena.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This is of course made with traditional media in mind, right? With streaming you can make it, but it's a this is made of course in mind to that you have real competition over time. The streaming it works a little bit different. Okay. Any other takes on this? So we talked about how it economically could be interesting, but not in terms of relationships. Mr. Hugo.
Yes, I think that a strength of this policy it is that you stop like external influence from other countries that want to
Mm-hmm.
affect you, like your culture, or that want to make a better image of themselves. That way, like you protect your own culture and you also protect your people, let's say that way, from external influence.
Okay. And you could argue that maybe people would have a bit better understanding of their own society if that's what they consume, right? A lot of people might think that in court you have citizen juries because that's what you see in American TV, but we don't have that. And that kind of confusions could be limited, maybe. All right. Any other strong opinions on this, Miss Mariana? What do you think? I know you just joined. Should the state force media to let's say show 50% Mexican content
Well, that could
or
make
not?
well
Yeah.
could make the Mexican content more a little bit better. Maybe they work on the quality of the content. And
Okay.
in this, for the second, I don't know. Like I I am in favor of more like the I'm in favor that people know multiple languages.
Mm-hmm.
So stopping language so hard, it looks a little bit like I don't know, like hateful. The French have that stereotype that they hate Americans,
They do.
but uh,
So
well, I
yes,
think it's a little bit extreme.
yes. Let me introduce the second one. Right. The second one is that you'd be forced in media and advertisement to use a national language. So you cannot advertise in English, for example, or you cannot have untranslated TV shows. And in France, they have this again. They say that all messaging must be in French. Um, so no Arabic and no English either, and that means that all media has to be dubbed if it's foreign, because they don't want the English influence over their language. Mr. Hugo.
Yes, thank you. I was going to say that thing about the French and the English language. In fact, in Greece, there was an escalation of tension in the Canal de la Mancha because of some teachers that were protesting. So both France and the United Kingdom, they sent like worship, yes, worship, like to protect the sun or to regulate the sun. So the relation between those countries is really like tense. So I
I had
think
a hard time hearing the last part. You said the United States and France do what?
no, the UK and France, like they send worship to the Canal de la Mancha. I don't know how to say it in English. But this is, I think, one of the reasons why they do this. Because they have a very tense relationship, like the UK and France.
Hmm. Okay. Um, that could be. Any other, let's say, what other ways you think that the states could use this for, or could be advantages of this?
For the second one, or like if
Yes, or any.
uh like for the second one, I think that like you can deny that English is a very important language for like for jobs. Like many jobs ask you to talk English or something. So I don't like the idea of spreading the national language. Like of course it's important, but like I don't see like the point because even at the end of the day, uh, most jobs ask you to speak English or something. So yeah, or even like when people go to the United States, like it will be better if they know the language rather than be like
Oh,
just Spanish.
mhm.
So
It's a nationalist policy, right? The point is to protect your culture and to also kind of bar outside influences. Um, and because language does influence to some sense, you will see that the rest of the world, because of these two things not existing, most of the world have a lot of sympathy for the United States. Maybe not if you think about it politically, but if something bad happens in the United States, the whole world will, know about that and kind of sympathize with them. Um, because they're the media landscape and the sound also that you kind of grew up with. And if you would want to counteract that, you would need to ban them, I guess. Um, okay. Any other things on these two?
I have
I think. Ay, perdón.
sorry, you go, then I go. You go,
Okay.
Mar.
I think that the second one could be difficult to apply in some specific countries where they speak two languages, or, for example,
Well, you would just have it two languages, no?
mm, for example, in the south of the United States, where they have both Spanish and English, they would have it in two languages.
Yeah, so in that case, right, if you would do this, if you have one official language, if it would be English, you would do that to to kind of force these people to assimilate and to integrate in your society. Well, if you can keep consuming media from your home country, well, you could do that anyway, but if you keep getting into your home language, you have no incentive to learn um, the language of the country you're in, and thus you will have less unity. If you have like Belgium, if you have three official languages, you would just make it that it has to be in one of these three, and that would be the variant then. But the United States has no official language, I think,
um,
so it's they don't have this policy. They don't need to because they're the empire. They're at the center anyway.
yeah, people know. And for example, in countries where they are coming a lot of immigrants, and
Mhm.
they apply this nationalist policy with the intention of like, the immigrants, well, learn the language. Well, maybe it's okay.
You could also argue that they will never understand anything then, because you have no starting point.
Mhm.
um, Miss Fia, you were going to say something. You were going to compliment Mariana's
Yeah,
response.
yeah, I saw it in the other way that Mariana did. For example, here in Mexico, if you only if we only use the national language, maybe it will be more accessible for indigenous people who like speak other language, and maybe it will be easier for them to access to to the media and all that for some of
Yes,
them. And like it all like I know that most indigenous people knows how to speak Spanish, but there's other people, other persons who don't. So it will also be like a way to integrate them into our Mexican society.
yes. With as a consequence, of course, that their own languages might disappear. But that's the choice that the nationalists are willing to make. If they're big nationalists, if they're regionalists, they will argue for the opposite, of course. Okay, so this is one kind of nationalist policy that I don't know if you knew existed in France, for example. Um, that you could take and kind of do everywhere, right? With obvious strengths and weaknesses. I think the first one is interesting. I would not like the second one, but I think we can each have a different thought on this. The next one are about barriers to citizenship, which is a bit more personal because I'm an immigrant. So, first one would be to make your law. So, okay, a little bit of international law. Citizenship, let me introduce this. Citizenship is assumed by international law. You have a human right to nationality, and the whole system is built on the idea that everyone has a nationality, otherwise, nothing works. But the right to grant that nationality or that citizenship falls fully on the sovereignty of the country. The country decides what creates a national, and there's no uniform rules to that. In some countries, you gain nationality by being born in the country. In other countries, you gain nationality by being born as a son or daughter of people who have that nationality. That's through blood, not through location. In some, it's both. In some, you can gain nationality through procedures. You could do it through investment. You could do it through taking a test, or you could do it through association, to marriage, for example, right? Mexico has all of these, by the way. We have every possible way of getting citizenship. Um, and one of the few countries that does so. So the question is, how about we change that to a situation where migrants can simply never gain citizenship? If they're not from the country, if you were not born there, you can never become Mexican. No matter if you marry a Mexican or if you live here for 40 years, etc., that is just not an option. You can be there, you can be a resident, you can be a migrant, but you always stay a migrant. You can never get into the nation, let's say. What do you think about that one? What would be the strengths or the weaknesses of such a policy? It would be a big change for Mexico. Very nationalist, obviously. Mr. Hugo.
Thank you. I think that as strength, it would be that you can like um, stop infiltrated people. Like if an army wants to send like spies and that kind of those things. Like it's
Mm-hmm.
very elaborated, but I think that will be one of the very very few advantages of this policy.
Okay.
Of course, the many disadvantages is that well, people like refugees or people that marry some Mexican, people that have Mexican friends, like they wouldn't even be able to get the citizenship, and I think that it would be very hard because of documentation. Even when the child wants to like make any kind of process with documents, like it will be also hard for them to get like the papers from their parents.
Okay. Yeah, in the case of the child, then the child would be born there. So that depends on how your law works. But you could say the child would then have it, but the parents never get it. Okay. So who pointed out that this is, well, not very nice for the people it applies to. Mr. Diego and then Sophia.
I would say that a weakness could be that by denying the right to gain a citizenship, you are then also denying maybe the right to vote. Maybe you're gonna make it more difficult to buy a house or to do any bureaucratic um, process, or I don't know, maybe it's gonna be more difficult to gain a social security. I don't know. That could be a weakness in the bureaucratic like sphere.
It would hinder people, and that would have consequences. Okay. Miss Sophia, what do you say?
Yeah, I was also going to say something similar to Diego. Uh, but the thing with nationalism for me, like it's pretty, like it leads to discrimination, but in some indirect or direct way. And I think and feel that this policy it's very direct to the individual, because if you're living in a really like national country where they see like the migrants as the reasons why their country has problems, if they can access to the nationality, like they will be rejected by the people, and that will definitely affect uh, like the social life there. Because like I don't know, if you're always seen as a migrant, and if in your country migrant is something bad, for example, if some crime is committed, they are going to look for migrants because they are bad people or something. So yeah, I think it's kind of discriminatory.
Well, I don't know if that would go away because if you have a different skin color, you still look like a migrant. But yeah, it would be it is, that's what it is. It is discrimination. It's explicit discrimination that you're making. Miss Mariana.
Yeah, again, talking about migrants, like people that migrate to another countries and they don't have papers, they would never have papers, and that would make life so hard for them. But then, if they stay in their country, they also going to suffer. So I think it's a unfair law to human rights, but maybe for the country, it could benefit them, but for other people, it's a little bit harsh on them.
Well, yeah, but now you say something interesting because one thing with nationalism is that it's nationally focused, but that means that it's a hard time of generalizing it because this is very different if you think of this for your own country, if you think of this for other countries, right? For your own country, you could see the advantages, but then if you would ever want to migrate, the flip side of that is that you can't, right? Um, So indeed, if all countries do that, then migrants would have no real place to stay ever, and it would be really hard to migrate. You can migrate, you just can never become part of it. So it depends a bit with this. Like if you think about it just for your country, if you think on a more ethical level, as you think you want all countries to be like that, it's kind of a different question there. Anyway, that's not the case in Mexico. We don't have this, but you could. The second thing we do have Um, and this is the one why I said Pablo Escobar there, because these are my feelings about this law, is that it prohibits foreign residents from voting and from political participation. As you know, Mexico, we have a law about banning people from political participation. It's very important to me what exactly that interpretation is, right? I, I don't read it as limiting my freedom of speech. If not, I should stop teaching right now about politics. Um, but it does certainly include that I cannot vote and that I also cannot run for office, even after I would obtain citizenship. If I would become Mexican, in Mexico, political participation in the true sense of being in politics is tied to origin, not to nationality. You need Mexican blood to be Mexican president, not to be Mexican. That's how it works. So I, even if I became Mexican, could not be elected, which is very sad to me because I'm into politics. I would love to run for some kind of office, but I can't. Um, this broke my heart. The first time I understood this, I was teaching this, and the student was like, "Oh yeah, but it's like this." I was like, I kind of died on the spot because I was planning. I was planning. Now, I think in Nivelion, we have an exception to this. I think in Nivelion you can run for a local deputy. Now, I think also Morena is pushing nationally to change this to that you could run for local Congress if you're a nationalized foreigner. But in general, let's say the proposal is that you could not vote even after you become a citizen, and you could also never run for office. What do you think of that law? And what do you think are the strengths and the weaknesses of that? Mr. Hugo.
Yeah. Well, I think that a strength is that, well, you prevent, as I mentioned before, like other countries to try to send people. And maybe it's like too elaborated and maybe it's too unrealistic. But I think that
Mm-hmm.
the goal of that policy is that you don't have external influence directly in your government, like that other countries wouldn't govern your your land, let's say that way. But I think that a very big like weakness of this policy is that, I mean, we don't have too much people like you, for example, that really knows about politics, that could contribute too much to our society. So I think that's a very big weakness, that we are just close and just uh, well, like forced to vote for the same people. I mean, local people that have bad intentions against our people, and we cannot have foreign people, in this case, nationalist people, that have better intentions for our society. So I think that's a very big counter.
Okay.
And also, what I think is that, I mean, maybe we, well, I really think that we should let nationalist people to be part of the government, to occupy popular election charge. But I think that, well, just because of national security, maybe we could put a limit in, I don't know, maybe like the 25% of the Congress to be of nationalist people, or maybe the 49% of it. I don't know what you think of it, like
Also, you would
regulating.
say it could be possible, but there would be quota, like maximum number of people
Yeah,
that. Okay. Well, that's what I think of it. I'm against this because it stops me. So of course but your proposal is good, but I don't like the number two. But what do you think? Someone else?
Doctor, in which countries they allow foreigners to?
United States. Arnold Schwarzenegger famously was governor of California, and he was born in Austria and grew up there too.
But
Um,
like any, I don't know, like Latin America or Asian country allows this, because like maybe it's like it has sense, because like we are we were a country who used to be colonized by us,
Mm-hmm.
so you don't want to have another foreigner ruler. Like it makes
Mm-hmm.
sense if you're trying to be protected from colonization. But if you are like United States or any other European country, well, you don't have to be afraid of anything because you have the power.
Europe was destroyed by two world wars last century. It's not like we like never had trouble, but okay, okay. So you say that one of the strengths of it is that it protects against neo-colonialism. Um, in the United States, you can become president, by the way, but you could have any other function as that. All right. So we have the colonial argument. Any other views on this? Mr. Martinez, I've not heard you in a while. Are you still with us?
Yes, teacher, but um, well, I only
That's
share
it.
the
Like,
opinion of my partners.
You what?
I don't have anything to add. I share the opinion of my friends.
Okay, okay. I'm not very clear. What is your opinion on this, though? Do you like the law the way it is? I won't take it personal.
Well, I think that what Sofia said, it's like we have the well on the States, if it's legal, it's because I think that this was where the colony won. But here we have like that, I don't know, memory. I don't know if it's correct, but I think that I prefer that like only Mexicans for the charge.
Mm-hmm. The United States was a colony, right? But yes, different history. Mr. Diego Marcelo, what do you think?
I would say that even if okay, there's like historical reasons to prohibit the running for, I think the right to vote it's more problematic. Uh, I would say it's easier to only let the people who live in the country to vote. It's a right, a fundamental right.
Okay, okay, okay. Yeah, you could make the argument there that, well, people pay taxes and such and live there, so they would be affected by the same thing. Okay. Hugo, do you have any final thoughts on this?
Yes, teacher. I was just going to say that I mean, I'm not, of course, for this policy, like changing this policy, to also let nationalized people participate in politics. Also, well, I think that a very good reason why we should do it is because nationalist people, they most of the time they have family, like they have Mexican sons, they have a Mexican wife or a Mexican husband. So I don't think that they would hurt our society because they have a very strong link with it.
Mm-hmm.
Like they have
Yeah.
Mexican family, and I think that's why like they also care about our society because they do have Mexican relatives.
Yes.
I mean,
One. That's true. That's true in my case. One thing we didn't discuss, one negative of this, is that voting and political participation is also about representation, right? And is also about power. And in many countries, you have quite large minorities of foreigners who then would have no political representation in the sense that they would have no one defending their interest. So if you have an already nationalist country where the foreigners could never gain any political representation, their interests would also never be defended, and they would be even more vulnerable to further nationalist laws, etc., etc. There would be no kind of comeback from that. Um, that's why in Europe, for example, in Belgium, migrants, even if they're not Belgians, just people like me, you would have the right to vote on a municipal level in Belgium. So you can vote for mayor elections to give them some kind of recourse against it, but you don't have it on federal. But if you become Belgium, you can run for office or prime minister. Former prime minister is Italian, for example. So that is possible. Okay, shall we move on, or any further thoughts on this these laws? Ms. Marianne.
Like, I would understand why someone would be like concerned if there's a candidate that is from another country, because they would think like, what do he or she knows about the place I live. But for that, I would say, like, if you make a modification and said like, you are not a resident, like where you are foreign, you have citizenship. But if you live, I don't know, like 8 years here, now you can run for certain positions in politics. But
That's how it works, because in order to get citizenship, you need a number of years there anyway. So yes, that would come together. Okay, so that would be your modification. There's maybe some time limit, some kind of earned right through time or something. Okay.
uh-huh.
Sophia, what do you think?
I was gonna say that like a weakness, sorry, maybe that like if you like people have this sympathize for people who is really prepared. So like you're foreigners, like maybe have a lot of college degrees or PhDs, or if they are more prepared according to the meritocracy line, well, it will reject people who is actually prepared for rule a country or something like that. Like it obviously depends, but who knows? Like for example, you like it's really it's like you. I'm kind of sure that you have a lot of preparation and education that most of Mexicans, and like people have this meritocracy feeling that if you know a lot, well, you are going to be a good governor. So like it kind of reject that. Like I don't know if it's really a good or a bad thing, but it's kind of
Yeah, you could use that as a political party, some kind of advertisement, right? Diego, you
Uh,
gonna
Teacher,
come
just
back on this?
another thought is that, for example, it's it's something, yeah, more another thing, but it's kind of weird. For example, I don't know how much, but
Yes,
I believe that you have been living here for a lot of time. But for example, our candidates
5 years. Yes.
for the uh, I forget the word for the alcaldía. For example, Colosio and Cienfuegos, that they supposedly, well, they didn't live here in Monterrey. They are from other cities,
They're
and
from
it's kind of,
Sonora.
yes. So it's kind of, well, they are Mexican, but they are also like foreigners from Monterrey. So that it's kind of like not a contradiction, but like a laguna that I think we need to fix.
Okay. So you'd have like a stronger variant of this law that would say that you have to be from the state, from the city that you're running from.
Well, I think that is very important. For example, here in my district, there is the pre-candidate, Pato Zambrano, and he's running for my district as
Is he
alcalde
running for
Curi.
the pre?
Yes, he's running for the pre, and well, he's from another. He isn't even It's the district is Cumbres and Valverde, and I don't know. I think that he has never been here in his entire life. Like the first time he come here, it was like for campaign. So I think that is not fair. I don't like that at all.
Okay. Yeah, he was PT's candidate for mayor last time, so it's funny how he.
Yes,
Well,
yes.
well. Okay, Sophia, you want the word back?
Yes, I really coincide with what Diego said. For example, also my deputy is Antonio Atolini Murra, and he hasn't lived in my city in Torreon for like 10 years. And he's trying to say things and have some proposals that doesn't have to do anything with our city. So it's kind of like I think if you have to, if you want to represent people, at least you have to know people. And to know people, I think that like you could do it as a Mexican or as a foreigner, because that's actually pretty interesting how even foreigners could be more connected to the community rather than other people.
I think the other way around too. You don't need to be a foreigner to betray your country to another country. I think there's many evidence of Mexicans selling out Mexico um, in history. Okay. So some voices in against this, but also at the same time you want more of it on a local level. Um, we have an interesting mix here. Mariana.
Wait, last thought. Maybe a weakness of this law could be that you could have another perspective. If you have foreigners in politics, like maybe they do things differently, and you are restricting yourself that possibility. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Good. She said final thoughts. I have to respect that. Um, and your mom loves him. Oh well. Good for your mom. Moving on. Right. So we just talked about political rights. Now I'll talk about some different rights that are more relevant to more people than myself. Um, you could have a trapped or a two-tier rights system. What does that mean? If you're gonna have migration anyway, right? Those immigrants, depending on how your law works, are gonna have certain rights, and if they become residents um, or even nationals, they might get more rights, right? Now, the first proposal is that when they have rights, for example, access to healthcare, they should have it at half the rate of nationals, even if they become nationals, right? But I mean, then people who are from there who are indigenous, let's say. So the foreigners would get the same thing, but no, not the same thing, would get the same right, but they wouldn't get the full right. So let's say you have a right to pension, you would get half the pension. If you have, you could apply for becas, foreigners can apply to becas. One of my becarios is, both of them actually have one from Haiti and one from Colombia, but they would then only get half the money, right? Or things like subsidies on water, you get half the subsidy, or electricity, right? So the foreigners can get it, they just get half of it. If it's a numerical thing, or if it's, I don't know, housing, they have to wait twice as long, or something like that. So you have the same rights, you just have two variants. You have, let's say, the premium, and you have the garbage variant of it, and the immigrants get the garbage variant, while the nationals get the premium variant of the same service, at least for the first 20 years. This is, I don't know concrete examples of this, but I know these are proposals in various countries to do this. for example, in Belgium, the right is proposing this, or nationalist/fascist party is proposing this. That, for example, my kids I would get half the child allowance that other people would get, for example, if we would be a migrant. Mr. Hugo.
Thank you. I'm so against against this kind of proposal because it's like treating them, treating the migrants or treating the nationalized Mexicans as if they were less, as if they were less people. And I mean, everyone has the same needs. We are all human. So
Mm-hmm.
if we are migrants, it doesn't make us need less than the locals. And I think that it's very the fact that you allow them to have something, but that you give them less than what you have. That I think that's very discriminatory.
Okay, so you think it would create some kind of like second rank citizenship, which it does. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one weakness that Hugo identifies. Any other thoughts about that one? Strengths or weakness? Or both? Miss Mariana?
Yeah, I also think is discriminatory, but
It is. That's what it does, explicitly. Yeah,
yes,
that's the
and
proposal, to discriminate.
discriminate people. But maybe if you apply this policy in areas where foreigners are like I am saying this just to see strength. No, no,
Mm-hmm.
no. Okay. But maybe if you apply this in, for example, in Mexico, in the beaches of Mexico, where foreigners come and buy like huge amounts of land and they gentrify the area, or in some areas or different states where there's a lot of concentration of immigrants, but no immigrants, no, foreigners, and they gentrify the area. Maybe if you apply this policy, you
But that's
could.
a whole different thing, no?
Yeah.
That's interesting. That's just a different thing. So you would limit foreigners from buying stuff. Well, that could be your proposal. That could be cool.
Yes.
Okay, okay. That's not a bad idea. It's just some different. So back to this one. Any other thoughts on that? Hugo, you did you think of strength or?
Well, as about that point, like preventing foreign people to gentrify the area, I think that it would be the same problem if Mexicans do it.
Well, except that they're Mexicans, so they're better than foreigners. Would be the nationalist logic, right?
No, yeah, but I think it's not right. Like the regulations should be made for everyone, not just for foreigners or for nationalist people.
Okay. Can anybody see any strengths of this policy? Sophia, can you?
I actually was going to say a weakness
I
that,
okay.
sorry, I will think
Okay.
of a strength. But like for example, in the other, I understand why you shouldn't allow like why it's like why you shouldn't allow immigrants to become like president. Like I could understand that like for reasons of power
Mhm.
or something, but here like people steals people and people deserves a healthy, good life. And maybe if you give them half pensions, half scholarships, or any other thing in health, maybe it will be not enough, and maybe immigrants will, become a problem for your country. Like they will be in poverty, or they maybe do some crime, or they, like they will maybe affect, like in the end, the Mexican society. So I think that it's better to treat them as equal and like try to make that they have a pretty nice life. So yeah.
Okay, so you think it could have negative effects on society because of the consequences on. Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, because maybe like people that still have a lot of pensions, like all the pensions and all the scholarship, like they maybe face other problems.
Hmm.
So if you don't have like all the help, like it will affect. So yeah.
Okay, okay. Mr. Diego Martinez.
Teacher, I have a question.
Okay.
In what situation do a country will need to be for them to apply this kind of policies?
What do you mean? I don't
Um,
understand. Sorry, I'm stupid. You
uh,
have to be patient with me.
well, I think it's kind of a cruel, even kind of policy. But in what kind of, I don't know. I don't imagine this. Like, for example, if they could use him, if they have a lot of like an excess of foreign people. I don't know.
Okay, so you want to ask me what I think would be like why a country would do this?
Uh-huh.
Well, two strengths that we haven't discussed. One, it saves money. So you it's another way of balancing the budget, right? Is just to pay less to certain people. That's usually the main argument that you would do it to save money. Another reason why I'm actually not against this. I'm against it like I wrote it here, like half. That's a bit crazy, but in a qualified version for certain rights, less. One of the advantage of giving less to foreigners is that you, in a way, strengthen solidarity because you take away the argument that foreigners are expensive and that they cost your economy. If you give less to foreigners than they bring, because foreigners pay taxes, right? But if you give them less back than you give to other people, then percentage-wise, foreigners contribute more. So this could be an answer. To answer your question, if your society is very xenophobic, this could be a way to relieve tensions, and to make people back off from hating immigrants so much, because they'd be like, "Oh, immigrants are stealing our stuff." But if that's not true, like if they're actually discriminated, that would make your racist people less angry, if that's possible. If such a thing is possible, it would make them, it would pacify the country a bit, which is in a European context why I'm not 100% against this. Um, if you would give them 80% or something of what you give nationals, that would make nationals feel better and would make them feel okay with expanding maybe the benefits, right? Or what's, it's a way to save the welfare state from neoliberal destruction. That would be a way to you could defend this. Um,
Okay, okay.
and as a foreigner myself, I mind this less than having less rights. I wouldn't mind this less than political. I wouldn't mind less if I would get 20%. Not this half. Half is a bit extreme, but I want to make it a very clear example. But if I don't know, if I would get 90% or 80% of the pension, yeah, well, all right. So that would be, I'm playing devil's advocate, right? That's how you would defend this.
Okay.
Miss Sophia and Mr. Hugo.
I was going to say that like a weakness, no, sorry, a strength, maybe even if it sounds kind of Machiavellic, uh, like if people doesn't access to fully to some services, that means that they have to gain that money by working, and if they work well, like because they could have a necessity, they will allow companies to exploit them because they need the money or something. So like they become a mano de obra. uh,
See, you finally start to think like a neoliberal. It's working.
yeah, and well, that is positive because also it's better, like it will be better for people to exploit immigrants rather than their own people, but for companies it will be like it's better because they have more people to exploit, like you have more forced labor, or I don't remember, mano de obra. So yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's uh, that's a interesting point. You're ready to join the dark side. Come over. Mr. Hugo, did you also think of a nice strength of this?
No, I was going to point out about the pension, for example, like if it would be less, but I don't see why a pension would be less if the people work the same. Like I'm sorry, if they did the same work
Mm-hmm.
to get that pension, I don't see why one people would get less than the other.
Okay, so there's more of like a justice
Yeah,
objection to it. Okay, okay. So you can see here there's some strengths, exploitation, but also lacks cost, and in a weird way, it could save Social Security from being unpopular, which I think would be the most important point. But on the other hand, you create second-rank system, you create all kind of social consequences of why you have these policies in the first place, right? That you're gonna have, and there is some weird reaction with redistribution where they contribute more than they receive, which is often the case with immigrants. Yes, yes, he lost you. Now, the second proposal is similar to this. It's just a time limit. So no social rights, none, would be available the first 10 years, which means I would not have IMSS. I would, well, I don't use much of the Mexican state, but I wouldn't be able to have anything, right? No health insurance, well, unless private. I wouldn't start building my pension the first 10 years. Uh, my kids, I couldn't claim anything for my kids. No, none type of subsidy that Mexicans enjoy, or tax break or whatever. You could get the first 10 years. It's a variant, it's a stronger variant. What do you think of this?
Doesn't have sense. Period.
But why?
No, I find it so discriminatory. It's only for me, it's only an economic thing, just to save money.
Yeah, well, that would be the strength of it. It would save money.
And also to like to avoid a problem uh, for a while, but
Mm-hmm.
somehow at some point it will be a problem that you have a sector of the population that doesn't have access to these rights.
Yeah, yeah, it would save money, but indeed. Any other thoughts on this? So Diego is against this. Hugo, what do you say?
yes, I think yeah, as Diego said, it doesn't have any sense in the social aspect. I mean, I know that in the economic aspect it has, but no, I think that it's very cruel because imagine, for example, healthcare. Like, what would you do if you didn't have healthcare for 10 years? What if you had a child? Well, the child will be Mexican, so I think that's not a problem. But I think that like, if what would you do without healthcare for 10 years? Imagine that you have an accident or that you get sick. You would have to pay a lot of money to recover from that illness.
Yeah, nationalists would say, well, you should thought of that on forehand before coming here. That would be one thing. This is a deterrent of migration, right? If Africans come to Europe because we have healthcare, then and they know they won't get it, then they might not come. That would be one of the reasons why you want to do this.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair.
Okay, okay. But basically, I meant it's positive, right? I'm happy you learned to think in different ways. Diego's turning it into a negative thing. Any other ideas? You want to say something? Okay.
Yeah, I want to say something. Like as I said earlier, like this, like not giving people basic human stuff, like it will lead to bigger problems, like especially for example in the justice sector. Like if people doesn't access to, I don't know, healthcare, if they have any disease, they are going to rob medicaments or pills or something, but because they are a necessity, and then they will be on in jail. And I hope that we will think that jails doesn't serve, it's like it doesn't do anything for security issues and for the society. Like they only like they only put people away. Like but like of course
Uh-huh.
if you're having a nationalist point of view, like okay, yeah, let's put all the migrants in jail, but like it's a problem that at the end of the day will cost money.
Yeah,
So,
prisons cost money. But okay, that's a yes. If you think it through that far, you would indeed get to that problem. Because one effect, I'll play devil's advocate if no one else wants to do it. One effect of this is that you would only attract richer immigrants, right? Again, poor immigrants, although you won't, because a lot of immigrants are illegal anyway and have no rights and they still choose to do it. But you could argue that if held, well, you just need private insurance. If you can't afford it, go back to your country. That would be the that's what nationalists say. I've heard them say this many times. Um, all right. Anybody else who sees some strength in this or not?
Okay. Maybe talking about healthcare, if you have a country where you have a lot of foreigners and you have a pandemic, and then you have your health system crashed, and then you make uh, like a sector of the population, in this case, foreigners, to not access to the healthcare, you could have less people there and treat them, like make them the national priority.
Yes.
But
Although in a pandemic, then the
yeah,
foreigners
yeah,
could get
yeah.
sick,
I,
and
I
yes.
know it's really discriminatory, but you can say it like that.
Okay, okay. Yeah, I just don't think it would work because then the foreigners are sick and they're gonna make you sick, and no. But then you can build a wall, etc. There's all kind of things you could do. Mr. Hugo.
Thank you. About that argument, I think I was going to say the same thing as you, like the immigrants would spread the virus if you don't give them attention. And also, I'm sorry, for example, during the pandemic, like I think that should not be a problem because like the frontiers were closed. No migrants could come. I mean, they have to be very regulated. So I don't see why if the health system crashes, it is because it was not enough already. It was already bad, not because of the migrants.
Okay. Yeah, with healthcare, it's a bit different than with other rights, but it's a bit more tangible there. I think what's interesting about our discussion is that you start to think it through and its consequences, right? And like how that would interact with other rights, etc. Going back to what we just discussed, by the way, one consequence of the thing I explained to you about foreigners and political rights is that I could never have a staff position in the faculty because higher positions are technically voted, or our faculty is on paper democratic, right? So leadership is technically voted, and since that is technically a political position, a foreigner could never be director, for example, or vice director, unless that law would change. So it goes into deeper things, and also with this, indeed, with healthcare, you can get health effects, etc., etc. All right. So these were the ones on two-tier rights, which again, mainly the advantage of it is you disencourage migration and you save money, which again, politically, if you think of it politically too, politically could keep things together. Um, and the alternative would be, maybe the neoliberal alternative would be that no one has rights. So then you don't have to discriminate. You could avoid that. Now, lastly, I want to talk a bit about protectionist measures. Now, protectionism is a very big concept, right? This could be anything from import taxes to quota to blah, 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 subsidizing national interests. There's a lot of ways protectionism or not having trade deals. Protectionism could mean many things. So I want to break it down into smaller pieces of it that you could actually apply. One of them, one proposal, which is clearly nationalist, is that local or state administrations, not federal, but local or state, should always give priority to local distributors in their public procurement. Public procurement, dear political science students, is when the government buys stuff. So if they buy, I don't know, orange juice for meetings, or if they buy new furniture, or if they buy vehicles, or when the government buys stuff, that's public procurement. And the proposal is that they could only, or they should give priority always to local distributors. So if there's a local and a foreign one, the local always wins the bet. But if there's no local one, then you go to foreign. What do you think of this? Let's not make it federal, because then you get into more complex things of defense, etc. But if we could say about Leon and local government. Ooh.
Thank you. No, I think that I would be against this policy because, like, the distributors, like, they pay the same taxes, and so I don't think, I don't think why they should get less priority if they pay the same taxes.
Okay. Well, to support local business. Okay, so Hugo says that it should be focused. If I understood you correctly, it should be focused on the quality of the service. Is that what you said?
Yeah, like everyone should get the same priority.
Okay, okay. All right. Other strengths or weaknesses about this type of proposal?
I would say a weakness. Well,
Mm-hmm.
Mariana. Well, okay. I would say that mm, if you um, make like so close, your options are so close, there's an opportunity for corruption, um, to this practice that is called en español es colusión, me parece. I think
Okay.
collusion. I don't know that the um, companies or the public or the distributors like get an arrangement to give a same price, and then there's no competition in between them. That was the problem with the medicines here in Mexico. That
Mm-hmm.
then AMLO opened the market to take to get into the country medicine from foreign countries. But yeah, that thing I will say that there's an opportunity for corruption, um, because the market it's so close.
Okay, okay. Well, medicine would be a federal thing, of course, but okay, yes, there would be less options and therefore more obscurity. Mariana, what do you say?
I have a doubt about what kind of things are considered here. Like, what things does the local and state administration what what are things that are considered here? the
Well,
product.
just let's to keep it simple. Stuff they buy, like they're physical local administrations or physical places, right? They're office buildings, and they use stuff. They use paper. They use consumables. They use furniture. They use services, and they use vehicles, etc. And so the government now and then. This is not about citizens, right? This is about what the government buys for themselves, so that kind of stuff. And the proposal would be that they could only buy it from local suppliers. And not
Okay.
only, but the local suppliers always have priority.
In this case, well, I agree with this because our simple things. We are not talking about like building like ay, ¿cómo se dice?
Well,
Puente or roads or that kind of thing. If it's just like paperwork, furniture, and those kind of things, I agree with it. And yeah, is to
but why?
incentivize
What would be the advantage that you see in it?
that you could incentivize local business, or if there is no business to administrate the government, you create one and you create jobs with that little industry that supplies the government. It
Okay,
could be a great policy.
okay. Job creation. Miss Sophia, what do you think?
I was going to say that maybe a weakness is that it doesn't allows competition because people is buying because it's regulated that you have to buy from local uh, distributations rather than a product that you like. So like you're putting your own people rather than good quality thing to use. But like that's for one part, but as a strain is I can see with what Mariana said, like you incentivize people to to be entrepreneurships or to feel like they are not going to like to feel that their business is not going to die in 2 months or something, like the government is going to kind of help you in a way because he's buying your products.
Okay. Yes, both arguments could be made. Um, Mr. Diego.
Yeah, I think it's half half because as Mariana said, I think there if the government is buying Mexican products and they're supporting local economy, um, well, we need for the government, we need for the that people for that they give the example. They have to dar el ejemplo, no? That we need to support Mexican products, but also what we need to find a solution for. I'm a Mexican company. They're buying me because I'm a Mexican company. So as Sofia said, what we could do for them to not to maintain quality and not because you're Mexican. I love Mexican products. I'm gonna buy you. Like we need to we not find that confidence also. You understand?
Yeah. I understand what you're saying. Of course, it depends on how many Mexican companies there are, right? It's not said that there's no competition. Just like if you, for example, if you would buy furniture from Carretera Nacional instead of, like all my furniture is, by the way, instead of Home Depot, there's more than one carpenter in Carretera Nacional, right? There's like 60 of them. So you still have competition among those, um, or whatever local factory you have. I hope you understand what I'm talking about. You have the street, right? And you have a lot of
Yes.
furniture shops next to it, like endless amounts of furniture shops who make that stuff in their backyard. Um, so it depends on the specific product. Okay, but that could be one thing. Anything else on this one? Or shall we wrap that one up?
Doctor, what do you think about that policy?
I'm for it. I'm in favor of it. I would do it, especially with local, because I like if you work for the government, they shouldn't. The consumer's choice is not relevant. If I'm in a meeting, right, as an adult, I shouldn't be crying that I want Coca-Cola instead of local fruit juice, right? As an adult, it's a bit embarrassing to me that you would make a fuss about this. So if you work for the government, you should just take whatever they get you. And if that's the way you can support local business, I think you need to give also local business a chance to prove themselves. And you don't get into this Manchester logic that you assume it's worse. In my experience, it's usually not worse than the American variant. Or because if you get foreign competition, usually they'll win based on price, right? Like Chinese products, which are not necessarily better than what we make here. So I think for local administrations, I'd be in favor of it. State, that you get into more serious things. But for like city of San Pedro to only have, I don't know, food from here, yeah, it would not happen because they're all Malinchista and they would hate to sacrifice their cola, but I would be for it. I would be for this, yes, for economic reasons. And because since the state is not a real consumer, the whole choice thing, I think, is less relevant. Because you're all employees, right? Like, I don't need to argue with the boss where the paper I'm printing on comes from. That's just. Um, but well, that would be my take on it. But I understand the disadvantages that you name. Too, of course, with this, you could have more corruption. You could, in the optimal Priesta version of this, the mayor himself would provide the catering that he then buys, and you would have this kind of nice loop between procurement and the people in government. So that risk you, of course, have. All right, and then the last thing is about um, securing national industries. This is a bit more complex. The idea, this is on federal level. The national government should invest in ensuring that the country has at least one domestic producer of each key commodity. So let's take microconductors as an example. Microconductors are chips, computer chips, in case you don't understand what that refers to. So the basic plate that you print, not the plate itself, but the stuff chips are made of, are microconductors, if I'm correct. Most countries don't make them, or they make very little of them. They come from China, and then you do your own versions with that. But you could say that that's a risk, and you could say that the national government should invest to make sure that you make that, at least one factory that makes that, or mouth masks, right? To take some example, that you would have at least one factory in the country that makes that type of commodity. Either, and there's many ways of doing this, right? Throughout the whole spectrum, the socialist or communist way is that you, as the government, do it yourself, or that you nationalize some company that does it. It could be via subsidizing it, like Europe does with pork meat, for example, right? We subsidize pig farmers, so because we don't want foreign pigs. And if some famine hits, that we still have our own production of stuff. It could be to fiscal policy, tax breaks, or just straight up deal making. That hey, if you make this, we will, I don't know, give you this land or whatever. We won't tax you. Anyway, the idea is that the government would make sure that and it depends what this list is, right? But think of things like medical equipment, these chips, steel, certain key building blocks for your economy to make sure that you never have none of it. What do you think of this? So that you would call that nationalist industrialist policy, basically. Miss Mariana, and then who?
Okay, I think is great, especially in the medical equipment, or if talking about engineering products, because the government now is forced to incentivize education and provide an industry. So, for example, doctors or medical engineers that graduate from college would have a secure job instead of searching jobs in other countries.
Okay.
And there here in Mexico, there's a lot of careers that if you want to have a future, you need to go to another country. Or and these kind of policies could be a nice way to create employment.
Okay.
And what else? Well, I think if you see it also from an ecological perspective, maybe if all countries do this, it's not very ecological. But talking about not buying things that came from a ship that was like 3 months in the ocean, and well, you could like reduce the impact of those things. And also you like we buy things from other countries because they are cheap to buy from other countries instead of making it ourselves. But it's cheap because the labor price of that were paid to those workers was very little. So, well, maybe you need to spend more, but at least you are not depending on the suffering of um, workers in other country. So, from an ethical perspective, maybe it's better, and that's it.
I was muted. We have a labor perspective, you have the ecological one, and then there's one about, let's say, global labor. Okay. So Mariana has offered us three strengths. Hugo, what were you want to say?
Yes, thank you. I would say that I would be for equality because a very good, like a very, yeah, big strength of it is that you would reduce the dependence from other countries. Like you would reduce your dependence from the international market, and you would make your own stuff. So you already, it would be good for like national technology. You would develop technology, so you would always try to make your product better. You would also, as I mentioned, reduce the dependence from the international stock, so you would have always availability of the product, and well, you would also like incentivize the national investment.
Okay, okay. So you think it could help in some competitive sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Good, good, good. So far, a lot in favor. Anybody sees any weaknesses with this?
Well, the only bad thing would be that uh, foreigner investors will be like, oh, here I can't do this. Oh, I have to compete because they are already doing something, and that maybe uh, will like that maybe will uh, like make investors think that Mexico is not an option or something.
But okay.
But like I actually coincide with what Mariana
Uh,
said. So
I think what you said though, maybe I explained it wrong, but I don't think that would happen because if a foreign investor makes it here, he would be a national producer, right? Like if Toyota, if, let's say we need at least one car factory and Toyota would build a factory here, that would be that one car factory. It's just about having it within your borders. It doesn't need to be from a Mexican. It just needs to be there.
I understood wrong. Oh, okay.
I
Me too.
explained wrong, better say. Okay. Mariana, you claim the word back. You get
Yes.
it.
With a weakness.
Uh-huh.
For example, if your country doesn't have minerals or you don't have enough petroleum to well, but then well, I don't know.
Then it's not possible.
No, no, that's not Badu. Well, I was going to say, yeah. In some cases, countries depend on on like products of foreign countries. No, so
Mm-hmm.
if you have now all things you do it your own, there's no way that another country is going to pressure you into no sé, like applying some policies or tax breaks or whatever
Mm-hmm.
because you are now independent. And I think
Okay.
this is a thing that a communist country, the first things that a communist country would do, because um, is if a country is going to um, became socialist or whatever, the whole world is going to pressure them into in the ways they can to stop them.
Mm-hmm.
But if you prepare yourself first and you don't depend on anybody, that could be a strength.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Yes, that is true. That is true. There's a strategic element to this too. Mr. Martinez.
Teacher, if it is a great policy and if it's too good, why we haven't made it already, or we have already made it here in Mexico?
Um, so there's two answers to that. One is por el régimen neoliberal is the first answer. Right? That's why we don't have it. Because we explicitly try to do the other thing. Um, so that's one for political reasons. And the other is we had this, most Latin American countries had this. In the past, in the 60s and 70s, you would have national industries um, that have gone. Most, not just Latin America, US too. US would make everything themselves. And then they outsourced it to China and they changed the law. So a lot of Brazil had this too. A lot of France, a lot of countries had this as their model, but then they got persuaded by neoliberal elements against it, such as, because we didn't name any weaknesses, such as efficiency, right? The fact that you don't have it usually is there for a reason because it's cheaper or easier somewhere else. So if you want to make it, it would be less efficient. At least that's the neoliberal argument. Um, or because they got persuaded with the reciprocity of this, that if other countries don't do it, then we can export to them, and those type of considerations you would have. So, or they just want to cut the budget and discuss money, so you don't want to do it. But this gets us in weird situations, like we have with the refinery, where Mexico just stopped using its refineries, and then we refine our oil in the US and they send it back here. Um, that's weird, right? If you're an oil producing country, but you don't have oil processing infrastructure. Um, so that's one thing the government tries to do with oil. They try to have at least one refinery here. And now with COVID in US, some people really regret this because they don't make most of their own medicine. They own it, but it's still made in China, even if it's US companies. So they don't really control it. If you get in a panic situation, no matter who owns it, China will just use those factories for themselves first. So with medical stuff, you get into these troubles. But this happened originally because of neoliberal thought that made people believe that it's more efficient not to do this. That's a waste of money to try to have everything national. Plus, for some very small countries, it might be hard to do this. Um, that would be, the arguments against this. But you guys seem fairly in favor of it, so that's interesting. I thought you wouldn't be, so I'm pleasantly surprised by this. Good. That's it. I thought we would be done in 10 minutes with this lecture, but we didn't, so I'm very happy that you participated very well and contributed many ideas to this discussion. All right, so that is that for now. And that means we're also done with nationalism. Do you have any questions regarding nationalism? No? Okay.
I don't think so.
Well, then you don't. I still need to figure out what we'll do next week. We're gonna do something, but either what I planned originally, I don't know, I shouldn't talk about this out loud, but anyway, I have this lecture which is like 3 hour long lecture about what I think about things, but it's not like my essays, it's more philosophical about playing with politics, how you combine all kind of political ideas. But I don't know if I should focus instead on content. We have to see. Either it will be that next week or what did I talk about last semester at the end? Did I talk about ecology? Did I talk about robots?
Robots.
I did,
Yes.
right? Okay. So then I won't repeat that now. I was just wondering how I ended last semester.
I think that at the end you talk about like something about politics, like how to stay happy in politics or something like that. I don't remember.
No, how to state outrage.
Ah, yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah, I remember the last class.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll do something different this time then. Unless you have any special requests, is there something that you think is missing from this course that you want to address in the last week, which would be next week?
Anarchism.
Anarchism. If you by majority want that, I could make a class about that. Yes.
Also, like ecology, like from a Marxist view point of view, a critique.
Okay. Did I talk about ecology last time? I did, right?
Yes, you did.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Yes, well, yeah.
Okay. Let me see what it will depends how much time I have in the weekend. If I could do something on anarchy, I could. I didn't consider it because anarchy is a thing that exists among students, but it's not really a real life force in politics.
Anarchism doesn't have to do anything like really important. Like I
Oh,
think.
okay. We can try. Okay. I'll see. I'll consider it, Sophia. Any other things?
Doctor, I have a question, but about the PIA. Like, is
Yes.
there any specific requirements other than what you told us at the beginning of the semester, like words or something?
That's a good question. In terms of words, I would want it to be between 1,500 and 2,500 words. I'll write these things down. And thank you for reminding me that I'll post it. But that would be kind of the length. So that's between 3 and 6 pages without title page. Of course, if you really want to write more, you can, but please don't go like 40 pages or something. You need to be merciful with me. In Times New Roman 12, if I have to give something. What else? In terms of form, it needs to be a Word document, not a PDF. In terms of form, that's the general requirements. And in terms of writing, I think I talked about this before, but they're the classic things I kind of care about. So don't have whole page sentences that are unreadable. Many students, they never put a point. They just keep writing. It's all the same sentence. You're getting too old for that. Try to order your paragraphs. Reread what you write. Don't just write it at one go. Read it again. You always make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. And at least I do. And thus you should try to pick them out. Well, anyway, I'm ranting. I'll try to write it down as a general instruction. Yes.
Okay. And regarding the content, is like a reflection on the book, right? Like a big reflection.
Yeah. I hope you realized this earlier that you have to read a book and such. But yes, it's what did I write at the beginning? Let me post this later with the exact instructions because I don't want to
Thank you.
contradict some earlier instruction.
Yeah.
All right,
Eh,
that's it then, or anything else?
I just have a question, but it's
Okay,
a curious question. Why?
okay.
I don't have a problem, but why in Word instead of PDF? It's for a copy thing.
Because Word files contain more data, digital data, more footprints, more things that tells me who wrote this or how long it took or where it's from. Word files come with a trace, come with digital footprint, while PDFs don't. Um, Also, Word files, I can count the words he wrote. With PDFs, I need to manually count them, which I gave up on doing a long time ago. So sometimes students try to trick me with the font or whatever, and with Word you cannot do that. That's the main reason.
Okay, sounds sounds good. Thank you.
A lot of people cheat. You need to take that into account. All right.
I have a random question.
Okay.
Do people really think that can cheat in your class? Like,
Oh yes. 10% of my students fail for cheating every semester. All
oh,
the time. Last your class, last semester, 7 people failed for cheating. Um, all the time. They you have all kinds of cheating, right? You have the copying from the internet, then you have the copying from the internet in Spanish, translate to English, but with still references. You have the copying from Wikipedia, including those like footnotes in blue. Um, you have copying from each other. You have copying from yourself in the past, so you recycle an essay. That's very common. Do the same essay for all classes.
Teacher, how did you manage to? I was like surprised because they were like they cheated because they copied an essay from last semester, I think. But how did you like figure it out?
By caring. Like I I know people will try to do this, so I just pay attention to it. How you figure that out? Because they had similar arguments, similar paragraphs. The words, sentences were the same. Um, and if the subject matter does, well, I'm not going to tell you. I have my ways of figuring this out, but people do try to cheat. I don't know how many of them I catch. It's my estimate at least 1 in 10 people try to cheat. And I want to believe I catch most of them, but often I'm not certain. Um, or there's also technical ways of catching. Anyway, I'm not going to explain. I'll see you next week. Take good care and thank you for today. Bye.
See you,
thank you, sir.
teacher.
See you.
Bye.
I
Right.